Hello, my friend. I am Jess M. Cutler, and I'm going to start with a confession today. I know this is the ENSPIRES podcast, but I've not been feeling very inspired lately. There, I said it. I feel like so many times when we see people in social media or positions of influence, all we see are the good times, the highest of highs, their strengths, their success. But rarely do we ever see anyone struggle. Or if they were struggling, God forbid they admit it. No one's ever walking down the red carpet and when, they're asked how they're feeling tonight, they're like, I'm barely hanging in there today. I don't know, I'm having a hard time getting out of bed. We don't ever hear any of that. I honestly debated even writing this episode, let alone sharing it. I talked to my business coach about it and was like, should I even tell people, this is where I am right now? Ultimately, I want this to be a place where you find encouragement and inspiration. But for me, sometimes it's hard to give it when you're not feeling particularly inspired yourself. But when I thought about it on the flip side, it's also very hard to write about your struggles when you're sitting on top of a mountain. So I decided I would try. So here it goes. Let me begin with saying nothing is wrong. Not really. But I felt like I needed to start there because that's where most of our minds go when someone says that they're struggling. We want to know what's wrong because we want to fix it. And for me, I believe that most people are genuinely good and they really just want to help others. I actually wrote a poem last year and I just need to turn it into a country song because that's the kind of vibe I get when I read it. But it was in one of the same valleys that I've been sitting in lately. And I just want to share one of the verses because when I read it, I was like, yeah, this is how I feel. But it said, nothing is wrong, but I'm not okay. Don't ask me why because I can't say. My little problems don't seem to compare to the real big problems of the world out there. So I keep my voice quiet and I walk all alone inside my head back to my home. But the problems keep piling. And although they seem small, stacked on top of each other, they look so tall. There's quite a bit more, but it was interesting to come back across those words in the season that I'm in now, because again, this is how I feel. And it's almost silly to feel like I have problems when I look around and I see so many other people who have it so much worse than me. But I think that this is something that we so often do because we decide that our problems and our dilemmas, our traumas, they're not horrific. So if they're not horrific, then they're not even worth validating or owning or even working through because somebody else has got it worse. We all have that friend that no matter how bad your day is going, theirs is always going worse. So if you'll allow me to not have it as bad as others, but still have a bad day, let me elaborate on a topic that I feel maybe hit home for some other entrepreneurs out there. I'll start with being an entrepreneur. It's not easy. And for me, I guess right now what I'm feeling is sort of a seasonal depression, and not seasonal like spring, summer, winter, fall. But for me, it's more of seasonal as in the end of event season. My coach, Erin Harrigan, she actually quoted someone else's acronym, and I can't remember who that was, but the acronym was HALT. And she said, you have to remember that the enemy comes at you when you're hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. HALT. And while I can't really say I'm hungry, I've definitely been feeling angry, and more so at myself than anyone else. Lonely, for sure, in just some of my spaces, and tired. And I mean, really tired, totally spent, completely burnt out. And recovery for me this season has been particularly slow. I've been trying really hard with the boundaries and putting them in place with the business this year. We've talked about it in previous episodes, and everything that we've put in place that I've mentioned has really been working well overall. But somehow I have still managed to overload my own schedule. To get through this last big program that we just did, I really buried my head down in my own work, and I kind of told the team that they just needed to figure out their own stuff while I was working through all of mine. Great leader, huh? I mean, everything I was doing for them, right? Maybe not. I don't know. I'm just so used to holding the majority of the business on my shoulder, or at least thinking I had to. Old habits die hard. Or, maybe I should call it what it is. Old addictions die hard. I haven't called myself a recovering stress addict because I thought once I broke that addiction from the adrenaline rush that I get from high stress environments, that I would never have to deal with it again. I've often said that every day that I walk into the office, it's like a recovering alcoholic walking into a bar. I am one decision away from a relapse every single day. For overachievers like myself, overdrive is our autopilot. Like, it is naturally where we go. And it is hard to stop the snowball effect of where, I don't know, what are my strengths, like my drive, my desire for excellence, and my push for constant productivity when I start feeling like we have so much to do, no time to do it, and it has to be done perfectly. Let's face it. What I've come to realize through my growth and self-awareness is that many of my strengths serve just as much as my weaknesses. But I don't know, I've just never really been able to understand that concept completely, explain it to others, or better yet, fix it for myself. And I'm a proven problem solver. So you can imagine this is extremely frustrating for me. So, what have I done? What have I been doing to try to get myself out of this slump? Well, first and foremost, I have rested. Will and I actually went up to just visit my family, and we stayed in an Airbnb, and it was way back in the woods. And when we got there, it was like this wonderful little oasis. Like, the dogs loved it. There were trees and land they could run, and just this cute little kind of cottage thing. And it said it had internet, but it really didn't. It had like a hotspot. And so, we tried to send out text messages. We tried to get text messages. We tried to call people. We tried to check social media, check our email. Nothing. Nada. We could not get through at all. And it's been a while since I have disconnected from technology in that way. And as much as I have tried to rest and kind of rejuvenate and refresh myself since, with IMC and with all these other things, it wasn't really until that weekend that it was like nobody could talk to me, touch me, like nothing. Just, it was me and Will and our dogs and quiet. And it was so amazing. It was so restful. And I didn't realize how much I needed that until I got it. So first and foremost, I've been resting. And this has been helping. But I did something else this year, which was kind of unlike other years that I have tried to revive myself after event season. And it's very interesting. It's kind of like what Richard Bischoff said in the last episode. I decided to have a conversation with my creator, just more so about what makes me me. I don't know. I just wanted to try to understand this Jekyll and Hyde human that I am between my strengths and my weaknesses, and how my strengths can become my weaknesses. And I don't know, if you didn't listen to that episode, you got to go back and listen. It was such a blessing to me, especially in the headspace that I've been in lately. Oh, but just as God, my creator, seems to always do, he put a book in my hand, or rather in front of my face, that I actually purchased at the IMC, which was the Maxwell certification conference that I went to. I actually had purchased it a couple weeks ago, and it was written by one of the amazing leaders that spoke there. Her name is Juliet Funt, and the book was called A Minute to Think. I was actually really intrigued by Juliet Funt's keynote because she talked about creating white space in your day. And for anyone who may not know what white space is, she defines this particular phrase as time without assignment. Y'all, I do not have white space. I don't really know what it is. I have shared pictures of my calendar. I have red and yellow scheduled breaks. I have gray transition times, but I don't have any white space on my calendar. You know what? I tried. Okay, when I started doing my own block schedule, I actually tried putting this color of white on my calendar once on my own. I don't know, but there was something about not having anything on, like in that place on the calendar that to me, it was like, oh, I can just use this time for like overflow time on active projects, or it was just simply time that I could just give away to anyone else who needed it. I mean, I didn't have anything going on. It was white and unscheduled. So white space was not sacred on my calendar and slowly was removed by the productivity police that lives inside my head. So needless to say, it was the intrigue in finding this unicorn of time space, and obviously the title, a desperate plea that I had just been saying over and over to myself. I just need a minute to think. That prompted me to purchase that book. And of course I purchased it. I laid it in a stack of books in my Zenden, and I was like, yeah, whenever I find time, whenever I find that white space, I'll just start reading it then. But just as God always does, after my prayer to understand myself better was done, I wiped my tears, I opened my eyes, and there it was. The book that I had placed right on top a couple weeks before. But it no longer looked like the title of a desperate plea, but rather a divine answer, if you will, like a gift even. A minute to think. No, I've said it time and time before. Some call it coincidence, I call it Christ. So I've really just started reading it, and I'm not even halfway through it. So when I discover how to find this elusive white space, I will do a masterclass or at least a podcast on it. But while I have been reading it, I have been finding another concept in the book. Very interesting. And it's like what John Maxwell always says, to grow yourself, you have to know yourself. And guess what this book has been showing me? She calls them the thieves of time. But in essence, it's how strengths, when taken to extreme, can actually become a weakness. She calls them assets to risk. But what's more is that she actually shares 4 simple questions that can help keep these thieves from stealing your joy, your patience, your purpose, and your promise of finding rest in Him. So, if you'll allow me, I would like to encourage you in the way that I'm trying to encourage myself. And I want to give you a little mini lesson here, right here at the very end, towards the end here, just because even if I feel like I can't inspire you personally, maybe I can share with you what's speaking to me in this space that's slowly pulling me out of the dim fog, just in case you might be in here with me. So, the thieves are our defining strengths, and she highlights 4 in particular: drive, excellence, information, and activity. So, they can sometimes get a little out of hand. When taken to extremes, the thieves of time become corrupted. Drive becomes overdrive, excellence becomes perfection, information becomes information overload, and activity becomes downright frenzy. Thieves lure us into a pace and pressure that actually can reduce our effectiveness. In the book, to help you understand which categories may be your strengths, just know I got 100% yeses in 3 of the 4 categories: drive, excellence, and activity. Now, I do understand that I fall into a unique category of personalities. For anyone that knows the Enneagram, I'm a strong 3, which is called the achiever, which at times it makes me feel very alone in my entrepreneurial pursuits because I want everyone in my company to work as hard and as fast as me. And if they can't work to my level of excellence, then I question whether or not they're the right fit for my company. I love how my sister, you gotta love sisters, right? I feel like I can say that because now you've met her. And if you haven't listened to that podcast, you should go back. I love how my sister pointed out a few days ago that if I had an entire team of me's, it would be a pretty miserable environment. I don't know, but the me and me, when she said that, I was like, are you kidding me? My gosh, it would be awesome. We would get so much done. But let's be honest. She's right. It would be pretty miserable. You need all types. You really do. You need all types to create a solid team. And in my team, we have that. Oh my gosh, we have so many different types of gifts and abilities. And that's amazing. But it's also challenging for me as a leader because I'm still trying to learn the best ways to navigate around each personality type and, work with them and help them grow individually and collectively in the team. So it's challenging. And honestly, I wasn't going to read these questions. And then, the more I kind of started thinking about it, I was like, well, you guys might want to know, how you kind of stack up in these 4 areas. So I am. We're talking about it. So I'm going to just read these kind of quick and roll through them. And they're yes or no, like yes or no. And it was funny, I actually did this with my team and she was kind of like, well, is this in our personal or in our professional? And honestly, like for me, when I read these questions, there was no difference for me between personal and professional. Like I am who I am in my personal and my professional life. So you interpret it however you want. They went across both categories for me. So, okay, let's go through this. So drive, and like I said, each one has 4 questions. So for drive, 1, do you take on too much? 2, do you have a hard time letting go of low value tasks? 3, do you say yes more often than not? 4, do you always crave more success? The thing about drive is that it can burn us out because actually, as it says in the book, success is a mountain that gets higher as you climb. The lie behind drive is that we should take on as much as we can handle. But the truth is that being selective about goals brings a higher quality output. Ugh. Okay, moving on. 4 questions to evaluate your excellence. 1, can you sometimes be too detail-oriented? 2, do you find yourself trying too hard on low-value tasks? 3, do you have trouble deciding how much effort to apply? If y'all don't even understand that question, then it's no for you. Because this one speaks to me on such a spiritual level. 3, do projects take you longer than they do others? Oh my gosh, my poor team. People driven by excellence tend to think that their capacity for detail is unlimited. They forget that each day we only have a certain amount of excellence to spend. She actually puts a quote in the book. It made me laugh so hard, so I have to quote it for you guys. It says, perfectionism is like peeing in a pair of dark pants. Nobody notices, but you get a warm feeling all over. And I know it's gross, but it is so true. I'm not gonna lie. I once took 5 hours on site to tie the perfect bow on the back of 120 Shivari chairs. Now that means that was 240 bows total. And y'all, not one single person noticed. And I mean, except for like the 25 people on Facebook Live that watched that video because I was like, you are gonna see my bows. But y'all, not one person that attended that event stopped when they walked in and went, oh my gosh. Y'all, do y'all see? Every single bow is tied exactly the same. They are perfect. Nobody, not one. And you can imagine when we had to untie every one of those perfectly tied bows at the very end and it took us every bit of 10 minutes, like my heart was broken. It was not a fun moment for me. It was a growth moment for me, but it was not a fun moment for me. So see, the lie behind excellence is that every touch point deserves to be optimized. Whereas the truth is that we lose time and energy, mired in the unnecessary detail. So, and I'm just going to give y'all this as a little side note. I said I'd go through these questions quickly, but let's be honest, it's me. The question that I've actually learned to ask myself when I'm stuck in this like perfectionism spiral is, will anyone notice? And I can pull back up the feeling of the perfect bows and how unappreciated they were. And that can actually stop me from going down that rabbit hole. So I don't know if you have to feel that pain before that question will work for you, but it works for me. And my team has started to learn me now. So if they see me starting to go through this like perfectionism spot, like they'll stop and they'll say, Jessica, will anybody notice that? Anybody but you. And it will stop me. Okay, sorry, moving on. Here are the 4 questions to evaluate your information. 1, do you always respond when you see a notification? 2, do you check your email often when away from your computer? 3, do you enjoy informing others and sharing information? 4, do you find it hard to know how much research on a project is enough? Yeah, it's easy to get pulled in. The internet has allowed us to search just about anything, anywhere, anytime. And the lie we tell ourselves is that there's no such thing as having too much knowledge. But the truth is that our human brains can really only consume so much information. For me, I actually feel like Jordan Rayner's book, Redeeming Your Time, has helped me in this department. I think about it, I'm like, good grief, I'm already in overload from the other 3 thieves. Like, I can't even imagine adding information like overload back into the mix. So I at least scored I only said 2 yeses in that one. So that was like 50% for me. Okay, here's the last set of 4 questions to evaluate your activity. 1, do you tend to rush through your work? 2, do you usually multitask? 3, do you often feel very busy? And 4, do you usually feel exhausted when work is over? Now, I will tell you, the book says that when assessed, more people scored at the high end for activity than any other thief. And knowing my fellow entrepreneurs and friends out there, my stay-at-home moms for sure, good grief, I do not know how they do it all. Man, I think I'm a busy person until I hang out with them. My goodness, I don't know. They're amazing. I've always made a joke that I'm going to have a shirt made that says, I do it for the check mark. Some people won't get that unless you know someone like me. But if you know, you know. Activity people, even if we've already finished it, if it wasn't on our list, we will write it down just so we can give ourselves a check mark. Now, I know I'm not the only one in that category. So when I make that shirt, I'm going to let you know. You can all go get that shirt. See, the lie we tell ourselves about activity is that busy and productive are the same. But the truth is, always being in motion can limit thought and deplete us quickly. Now, y'all, that wasn't like an actual test with results that I can give you, but for someone that scored easy 100s in 3 out of the 4 categories and feeling like I do now, I can tell you the higher the score is in each area, the more concern you should have for crossing over that line from it being a strength into a weakness or like an asset into a risk. Just your strengths just kind of getting a little out of control, and now they're kind of becoming that weakness. See, for every one of these predispositions, it has a value and a fault. And I encourage you to notice which one or ones tend to carry you away and reclaim control over that process. And if you're like me, you're like, okay, but how do I do that? Okay, yay, now I understand myself and I understand how my strengths have become my weakness. I understand it, but how do I reclaim control of that process? Apparently, you wedge in a few minutes of white space in your day and you ask yourself a few simplification questions. So I'm going to leave you with the 4 simplification questions from the book that are meant to serve as the remedy to help keep your strengths in a healthy place. So when your drive has become overdrive, ask yourself, is there anything I need to let go of? And for control freaks like myself, that is hard. Is there anything I need to let go of? 2, when excellence turns into perfectionism, ask yourself, where is good enough good enough? 3, when information becomes information overload, ask yourself, what do I truly need to know? And lastly, number 4, when your activity turns into frenzy and you got to quiet that productivity police in your head, ask yourself, What deserves my attention? I always think to that quote that's like, if everything's important, nothing's important. So when I start feeling like everything deserves my attention and everything's important, then I realize that nothing is actually important. So I know for me, I have written all of these questions on my whiteboard behind my head in my office. And as I am slowly, very slowly, pulling myself out of this season of recovery, y'all, it's been like a month now. I am reading through each one carefully to evaluate, what do I need to let go of? When is good enough good enough? What do I truly need to know? And what deserves my attention? And y'all, if if you're like my husband, who literally didn't even test close to the top in any of these categories, yay you. But I still encourage you to take these questions to a friend who may be struggling in their own season of burnout, exhaustion, overload, or frenzy. Just ask them these questions to help them gain back control. The best way to disarm these thieves that steal our joy and they steal our peace and they steal our sleep is to simply move from that automatic response to an intentional one. So while you may not be able to fix their problems, you may be able to lovingly guide them into a place of self-awareness and growth. Thank you so much for being a loving place that I can unload my heart and my head. I hope I didn't depress you with this episode. But, if you want to hear more about what I'm reading or any other ideas or issues that maybe I've mentioned before, please feel free to send me a message. I would love to hear from you. Send them through our socials, which they'll be listed in the show notes. And I would be happy to dive into these for future conversations. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.